Okay, I was trying to get myself away from discussing the laws, but I worry so much about you, and I see you're all having this discussions, multiple discussions. So I'm trying to combine them in a way. And it's basically about propaganda, propaganda laws, disinformation, misinformation. I told somebody to look up ethics in the media, ethics in politics. They do have codes of ethics, politicians and the media, and they violate it consistently. So think about, looking up ethics in politics, ethics in the media, and for the most part, a lot of that considers a lot of propaganda. So I'm doing the easy part. I just threw something in the search bar, propaganda laws, and these are the results. Okay, propaganda laws of the United States center on regulating how federal government communicates with the public, specifically prohibiting the use of taxpayer funds for domestic self-serving or covert influence campaigns, while also establishing framework to counter foreign disinformation. Key regulations include the Anti-Lobbying Act, uh, Anti-Appropriation Riders, and the Smith-Mundt Act. People were mentioning that should be repealed, but I think not. In the public interest, of course. That's the law. You know that, right? In the public interest. Everybody in the legal community is required, and making laws, enforcing laws is required to do what's in the public interest. Look it up. It's on the net. Key U.S. propaganda laws and restrictions. Anti-Lobbying Act prohibits the use of appropriated funds for substantial grassroots lobbying to influence Congress or state legislators regarding pending litigation. Appropriations Act writers, publicity or propaganda. Annual government wide riders prohibit the use of federal funds for public publicity or propaganda purposes within the U.S. that are not authorized by Congress. The Government Accountability Office interprets this ban materials that are self-aggregizing, covert in origin, or partisan. Purely partisan. Purely partisan. I'm apolitical. I don't take sides when it comes to politics. I'm always about policies and doing what's in the public interest as required by law. All right? That's part of, when I took the oath of allegiance to you, we the people, you know. So I'm a stickler for the law. People say I'm quite literal. Yes, because ever since I read the letter of the law, I found it needful to understand things. People tell me, you know what I meant. No, I didn't. I only heard what you said. And I held you to the letter of the law on that. I only know what you said. I did not know what you meant because you didn't tell me what you meant. That's why I did it wrong, because you didn't tell me what you meant. You just said something that wasn't what you meant for me to do. So that's why I'm a stickler for the letter of the law. I've been like that since I was a kid. But kids are like that. You show them something, they read it, and then you tell them to read something out of it. The Constitution didn't say that. The Bible didn't say that. It doesn't say that. Because they're a stickler for the letter of the law. They don't know anything other than that, the letter of the law, which is a law. Okay, look it up, letter of the law, and look up penalties for violating the letter of the law, and stick to that. Okay, don't forget to let your public service, especially those that write the laws, enforce the laws. Because a lot of times they like to tell you that don't mean what you think it is. Somebody told me about the Constitution, what the forefathers meant. I don't care what they thought the forefathers meant. All I care about is the law that was written and holding them to the letter of the law and violating. That is violating the oath, and violating the oath is desecrating our beloved U.S. Constitution. Originally designed to restrict the State Department from decimating government-produced foreign targeted programming with the United States, the Smith-Monterey's of Act 2012, effective 2013, repealed the ban to allow for greater transparency, but it also sparked debate over potential covert domestic influence. The Countering Foreign Propaganda and Disinformation Act of 2016. Part of 2017 National Defense Authorization Act. This law establishes an interagency center with the State's Department to coordinate counter-propaganda efforts and fund initiatives to counter foreign misinformation. Lies. Propaganda. Misinformation is just lies. In the legal context, it's called disinformation, which is entirely illegal, and penalties are fines, removal of public service, and incarceration. Look it up; it's on the net. Foreign Agents and Registration Act 22 U.S.C. requires agents of foreign principal engage in political activities, including distributing political propaganda, or file with the Department of Justice and label their materials. Recent legislative efforts, several bills have been introduced to restrengthen restrictions on domestic propaganda driven by concerns over government-funded media. Defund Government-Sponsored Propaganda Act, introduced in 2025 to stop federal funding for NPR and PBS. I can't agree with that. It's not government-sponsored propaganda. PBS definitely not it's all in the eyes of the beholder. Beauty is all in the eyes of the beholder. Whoever came up with that, they're taking us back to the golden age. The Roaring '20s. That's how things used to be back then. PBS helped educate me in many ways. The War and Peace Report. I can't count how many shows I watched. Nova. They didn't tell me how to think. They opened my mind. That's not propaganda. The SPIN Act of 2025 aims to prevent the U.S. agencies for global media from directing content like Voices of America at domestic audiences. The Charlie Kirk Act of 2025 aims to restore the strict pre-2013 Smith-Mundt firewall against domestic federally funded propaganda. Deprivation of rights, my God. No funds for enablers to adversarial propaganda. Proposed banning federal funds for entities doing business with social media companies associated with foreign adversaries. Enforcement and scope violations. Violations of the Anti-Lobby Act are punishable by civil penalties ranging from $10,000 to $100,000. Covert propaganda. This refers to materials where the government's role is hidden, which the GOA has identified as prohibited covert form of propaganda. Government speech doctrine. The Supreme Court has generally held that First Amendment does not restrict government speech, including potential propaganda, prompting debates on whether this doctrine needs to be revisited to combat modern government-created misinformation. And that's ethics violation. So look up ethics in politics. Okay, that's also legally considered disinformation. So it's the legal obligation of all lawyers and judges to point that out. That is disinformation. That's why Lynn Wood and Sidney Powell and all those other lawyers lost, is because they went to court with disinformation, but they were never charged with disinformation. Publicity or propaganda, West Tex. I really don't like politicians, but I was reading this. Introduces bill to protect Americans from federally funded propaganda. Personally, I don't think anybody should be allowed to put out propaganda. you know, misinformation to the public to sway their opinion. They sway their opinion with lies. You know, that's what corporations do. You know, it's called corporate fluff or corporate puff. I forgot which one. But the judge said, hey, you should know better than investing. These guys are just, fluffing up, puffing up the propaganda on this product so they can get you to buy, and it was your fault for believing them. Defunded government sponsored. I had a video I did on that about corporate puff, I think it's called. Defund government sponsored propaganda act. There shouldn't be any government propaganda, because that's what, swaying your opinion to vote for a certain politician, political party. No, all this is in violation of the public interest, people. Look up the Public Interest Act. It's just this. Let's see who this is. Congressman Corey Mills introduces the SPIN Act to stop domestic government propaganda. Yeah, it's in the public interest. Tired of lying politicians. It's bad enough we got lying lawyers and judges who don't abide by the rules of professional conduct and the code of judicial conduct. Everything that goes on in that court of law is under the color of law, deprivation of rights. So, if there was an actual separation of government branches, this wouldn't be happening. The unconstitutionality of government propaganda. Okay, that's what I wanted to talk to you about, people. Not in the public interest. Look it up. That's a legal mandate. Not in the public interest. This is not in the public interest. If you want transparency, you need to stop this propaganda. When somebody tells you you don't need to know, you need to know. It's just like when people tell you you don't need a gun. Sometimes you do, so it's better to need one and not to have one and not need it than to need it and not have it. I don't have one, but it's the phrase fits the purpose. Okay, propaganda laws. Okay, people, nothing but love for you, all right? May your Creator always be with you in the rain. Many beautiful blessings. I wish that upon everyone. I pray for that every night. May you have a long life and good health. I pray for that every night. Wish you but nothing, peace and love, joy and happiness. I hope my videos do more than entertain you and provoke you to use these laws, to confront your politicians, confront lawyers and judges and in the courts with the rules and the codes and effective assistance of counsel, fair trial. This is how due process happens. That's how I make it happen. And you can too. Listen, I'm not a smart guy. Far from a genius, not a stable genius. I just read a lot of books. That's all. And when I found the letter of the law, they became that more entertaining. Okay? Every law I look up, I look for the penalties. The penalties of those laws, for violating those laws. So look up penalties for violating the oath, the letter of the law. People throwing spirit of the law. Every time I bring up the letter of the law and they bring up spirit of the law, I say, well, the spirit of the law, so that we all hear and see the same thing, so there's no misinterpretation. It's a symbiotic relationship, so that justice may be served. In the interest of justice, justice must be served. And that's what I teach in my other videos. The only way you're going to get any of your constitutional rights if you learn what they are and use them in a court of law anytime you need to appear, because nobody's going to have your back like you. Nobody. If you read the preamble and the rules of professional conduct, it tells you that they're supposed to defend you as if it was their own life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness that counted on it. And that ain't happening. All right, people. Peace and love. Have a good night.